Here it is, my OBS starter guide. Now, even if you are familiar with OBS, there will be some tips in this video that may still be helpful to you. Also to mention that I am a Mac user, but most of this will be the same on the PC. I'll leave a link in the description in case you're unsure of where to get OBS Studio, and I'm assuming you know how to install software on your computer. Without further ado, let's do it. Here it is, OBS Studio. You should see this layout once you've installed OBS and done the basic setup wizard. One thing to note on the setup wizard is that I would recommend using a 1080p resolution. We can change these settings anytime, but don't worry if you've selected something else. We're going to start with some basic orientation of OBS Studio, but if you do need to skip ahead to something that you're interested in, there will be some chapter markers in the video. Now let's go over what we can see, starting with the canvas. Quite simply, whatever you see here is what will show on your stream. Then there are docs everywhere else. Docs can contain a multitude of things, from your chat, your audio, your scenes, your sources, to browser links and plugins, and so much more. Now remember that OBS starts off light with the bare minimum needed, so you don't have to install things that you might not want. As you build your stream, you're likely going to want to install plugins to enhance your setup, which we'll cover in another video. So we'll start on the right-hand side with our main controls. We've got Start Streaming, which of course starts the stream. We've got Start Recording if you want to record your stream. Start Virtual Camera, which allows you to output to things like Zoom or Teams and stuff like that. Studio Mode, which we can cover in a later video. Settings is obviously your settings, and Exit to quit out of the app. Next we have Scene Transitions, which allows us to choose which kind of transitions we want between each scene that we have. Then we have the Audio Mixer, which is our audio inputs for OBS. Then we have Scenes and Sources on the left-hand side here. We'll go through Scenes and Sources in a moment. Now there are more docs available too. If you go up to the menu bar, we've got docs. You can lock the docs, full height docs, which I've got selected, which allows you to put your docs in a more convenient way, which we'll go through in later videos. Reset docs, which basically puts it back to its default setting. Custom browser docs, which we'll cover in a later video, but this allows you to use a lot of third-party docs that you can get from the internet. Scenes, which we can see in the left-hand corner, Sources, Audio Mixer, Scene Transitions, Controls. Stats will show you some information about your computer, as well as your stream when you're going live. Some of these docs that you see here won't be available to you because they're actually plugins that are installed that you might not have. And down here below this line is where I've got some custom browser docs, which are my own. So don't worry about those, you won't have those. At least not yet. So docs can be moved around. I could drag the Audio Mixer doc here out, and I could put it to the right-hand side if I wanted to, or the left-hand side, or, fun fact, you can actually layer docs as well. So if I lay it over the Scene Transitions one, I can drop it there, and now I've got these tabs. This is a really good, efficient way to start grouping stuff together, especially if you're fighting with limited screen real estate. So I'm just going to go ahead and reset the doc. Of course, there is a menu bar as well for OBS, but the main ones you probably want to worry about at the moment are docs, which we went through, profile, because you can have different profiles for different streams that you might have. And then we have scene collections as well, which allows you to have different types of scenes and source collections. Okay, let's look at scenes and sources. So what are scenes and sources? A scene is a collection of sources. You switch from one scene to another. For example, from your Be Right Back scene to a gaming scene. Going between each scene, there's a transition, which is controlled through the transitions dock. Here, at the moment, it's set to fade, duration 300 milliseconds. You can choose, obviously, fade or cut. Now, cut will obviously just cut it straight to the next scene, or fade, which obviously crossfades between the two. We will look at scene transitions more in depth in later videos. So if we take our scenes, we could add a scene here, and we might want to call this, well, in our case, let's just call it just chatting. So this would be like a talking head scene, for example. We could add another scene, and we could call this gaming, i.e. a gaming scene. Within each scene, you can have a collection of sources, which we input here. Now, sources are types of media assets that you add to a scene to show on your stream. Let's go through some of the different sources that you can add so you have full awareness of what you can use. So here we have our sources doc here. Press add, and then we have a list of what's available to us. So audio input capture is a way to capture any sort of audio, for example, a microphone. If I click on this, audio input capture, that's fine. Press OK, and there we have some options available to us. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that for now. Next, we have a browser source. This is where you can add overlays, for example, from various websites, connect alerts from various websites, and of course you've got some extra options here for that browser source that you can use. One thing I would recommend is if there's audio within your browser source, control that by OBS here. And if you ever have a problem with a browser source, you can refresh the cache of it here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Next, we have capture card device, which of course allows you to input from a PlayStation 5 or any HDMI input, usually from, say, an Elgato capture card. Color source is simply a source of color that you can add. It's just a simple element I can show you. If I click on this, color source, okay. And then we have, in this case, white. I'll go ahead and delete that as well. Face tracker, I don't think is part of OBS as standard, so I'm going to skip that one for now. I'm pretty sure that's a plugin that I've got installed, so we'll cover that in a later video. Image is, you guessed it, it's an image file that you can add in as an asset. Image slideshow, so if you've got multiple images, you can have a slideshow of those images. Mac OS audio capture, it will be different for PC. This allows me to capture from a certain program. Mac OS screen capture, so you'll have something similar on PC, but you can basically capture your desktop or a screen or a program. Media source, this is things like videos, so if you want a background or a video to play as an intro, this is where you would add it. And one thing I do want to mention on media sources is, I'll just add this here, is use hardware decoding when available. I would highly recommend that. That's using your GPU instead of your CPU. And a big one is close file when inactive. These are two options I highly recommend to save on your CPU and your GPU when you're streaming. So next we have scene. So what you can actually do is input a scene that you've created into another scene, otherwise called nested scenes. A very, very powerful way of using OBS and something that we'll be talking about later. And I wish I knew it from the start. So this Siphon client, I think, is Mac only. I'm not going to cover that. It's not something I use either. Text, if you want to add text to your scene, might say be right back or a note that you want to leave. Loads of different options there. And then next we have video capture device. This is for capturing cameras that you might have connected to your computer. Group, if you want to group things together, although I would suggest not grouping things together. I would use nested scenes instead, but I'll cover that in a later video as to why. And then depreciated is some legacy stuff that you might want to use. So one thing to bear in mind is that sources do layer. So if I were to add a color source here, press OK, got a white source there, that's fine. I press add again, another color source, press OK, and let's do, I don't know, let's do yellow. Okay, press OK, okay. As you can see, yellow is on top of the white one. If I want to change that, I can drag and drop below, and then of course, it's now below it. So it's just something to bear in mind. So file organization on your computer is going to be really important to help find things quickly. Recommend having an OBS file and then however you want to organize it. For me, I do it things like audio assets, my media files, my image files, all in different places, so I can easily find which kind of asset I'm looking for. It will really help speed things up when you're trying to find things for OBS. That organization should 100% extend onto your OBS setup. Let me show you some examples of what I mean. Okay, so the first thing I suggest is organizing your scenes in an efficient way so you can find things quickly. One thing you could do here is if I type in a few dashes like that, and I could have live scenes, and then a few more dashes, just to make it easy to find, because eventually when your scenes and sources build up, it'll be harder to see. And then what we'll do is we'll have our live scenes underneath this. So for example, starting soon. Then we've got something that might be gaming. Or we've got just chatting, like that. Then below that, you might have something like this. So a bunch of dashes again, and we'd call this assets. Under here, I would have all my nested scenes, which we'll cover later on in the video. So I might put NS for nested scene, and I might have my shout out player. Then I might have my cameras. Then I have things like my audio inputs. So it's a really organized way of saying, all right, these are my live scenes. They're the ones I want to show my stream. And these are the ones that build up those scenes. But a few other tips I want to recommend is things like image files. I would type in IMG and then the image that I'm using. Another one I personally use is things like media sources. So if it's a meme that's playing, I might put VM for video meme. Another example is for, let's say, text. So if I add a text source here, I would put txt. For audio, I recommend using numbers rather than letters because audio input captures uses the numeric system rather than alphabetical. This is particularly useful if you're using a bot, for example, Lumen Stream or Streamer Bot, or for example, the Stream Deck, which I've got one here. That will show you just one long list of all your sources. So if you start indexing things like I've mentioned, it will be a lot easier to find things quickly. It's important to know where to access this, since when you add a source that has audio, you're going to want to know where these options are. So in the audio mixer here, we can either right-click anywhere on the audio mixer, and we can go to Advanced Audio Properties. Alternatively, we can click on the three dots here, and again, Advanced Audio Properties. And it shows us this window here. So on the left, we have obviously our audio input source, volume, mono, yes or no, balance left or right, sync offset, audio monitoring, and this is the bit I think is important to know from the start. So when you add an audio source, by default, it goes to the stream, but not necessarily to your monitoring device. If you want to hear what you're listening to on OBS, you'll then need to switch this to monitor only or monitor and output. Now, obviously, monitor and output will mean it goes to both the stream and to your monitoring device, i.e. your headphones or your speakers, whatever you're listening to. Over here, we have track selection, which usually relates to the use of VOD tracks, which we'll cover in a later video. Okay, we spoke about nested scenes before. Now I'm going to show you how powerful they are and why they're really important to use in OBS. Okay, so as before, we have our live scenes and we've got our assets. What I've gone ahead and done is added a nested scene called background videos. And I've got a background video 1 and a background video 2. Background video 1 looks like this. Very nice. Background video 2 looks like this. Very nice. So what we can do is add the background video nested scene into our starting soon scene. We do that by pressing plus. We go to scene, and then we select the nested scene that we want. So in this case, nested scene background videos. Press OK. Now, the nested scene background videos is playing within starting soon. If I go to background videos here, the nested scene, and I show that video there, it will now appear in starting soon. All right, makes sense. Now if I go back to background videos here and hide that one and show this one instead, same again appears on starting soon. And this is very, very powerful because I might have this nested scene across a lot of scenes, and rather than going to each scene that I've got the video playing in, I only need to go to this scene here and change that one asset. And then it will replicate across all of the other scenes that I've got that scene in. And when you start building an OBS setup that gets incredibly large, that is a massive time saver. So if you can, use nested scenes wherever possible to save a lot of headache in the future. Another example of why that's powerful is because you might have a bot that controls the nested scene, so you can switch between those assets without having to change the scene itself. So when you start automating things, plugins, etc., those nested scenes become very, very powerful indeed. Okay, so we started making an OBS setup there throughout the video. We've got our live scenes, we've got some nested scenes, we know what live scenes and assets are, etc. But what I've actually done is create a template that you can download from Coffee. You can input this into OBS and then you can drop all your media assets into it. And then from there, you can start streaming straight away. Let's take a look. Okay, so once you've downloaded the template from my Coffee account, if you go up to Scene Collection here and click Import, you'll be able to import the scene collection. Once it's imported, you then need to select the import that you've imported amongst this list here. Obviously, mine's got all of the starter templates that I've been working on, so select the one that's obviously showing for you on your OBS. What you'll then see is our live scenes and our assets just as before. What I'll do is go through some of the live scenes, and then obviously the assets is the really important one, which is our nested scenes. So I've got a blank scene there for you because sometimes it's handy on stream just to have a black screen if you need. Starting soon, be right back, and just chatting for talking head. Gaming, so if you're obviously gaming, this would be your gaming scene. And this is just a fun little bonus one, technicalities, so if you're going through something or testing something, you could always have that screen there. The big one is obviously our assets here. Where it says assets, just remember that's just a scene with nothing in it, that's fine. All cam sources, so if you've got the one camera, that's absolutely fine. Just click on here, add the camera in, and you're good to go. If you've got multiple cameras, obviously you would select the multiple cameras that you've got here. Cam box is for the box that goes around your camera. So if you want to choose a different box, you can absolutely do that, or you can choose not to have a box. Again, up to you, you can totally do that. All game sources, usually it's just a capture card if you're using PlayStation 5 or Xbox, etc. But if you do have multiple inputs, for example, you might be capturing your PC, then I would put it here as a game source. Same again with our game box. So this is a box that goes around your game if you wanted to. For example, you might on just chatting, but you might want your game just to show in the bottom right hand corner. Then you can have that ability here. Alerts, this is where you would have a browser source for your alerts if you wanted to. Shoutout, so if you are using a website that allows you to play clips from other people's channels, you can input the shoutout source here. Video overlays, so this is basically any videos that you might have overlay onto your stream. In my example, when I'm talking away on just chatting, if someone types in the word love, it got loads of hearts going everywhere. That's an overlay, and that's why I have all my video overlays there. Video backgrounds, this is, for example, if I'm on starting soon and I've got different video backgrounds that are playing, then that's where I put that one. Audio inputs, this is probably the big one and probably the most useful as a nested scene. So if you've got a scene that you've created and you want your audio inputs, you don't have to add them each at a time. You can just add the one nested scene for audio inputs and they're all listed there. In my case, I've gone from audio Spotify, audio mic, wavelink if you're using a wavelink. Of course, you can add and change and delete however you wish. Video memes, if you're playing memes directly within OBS, you could add your video memes here. If it's a full screen video meme, you could add them here as well. Sounds, for example, if you have a soundboard, you could have a soundboard nested scene added here. And image backgrounds rather than video backgrounds, you could have as well if you choose to. And then last but not least, I've got other, which is just anything you might be testing or anything you want to not use or just stuff that you might come back to later. Okay, so an example of using one of these nested scenes that we've got in our template. If we wanted to, we could add in the camera box here. If we unselect the lock icon here, we can then start adjusting where that's placed. And of course, we can move this box around and manipulate it how we want to. And of course, anything I then change within the camera box nested scene will then replicate over here. And of course, if I move it over there, it will stay over there. It will be simply the source of the nested scene that changes, which is just such a powerful thing to have. It sounds simple once you get your head around it, but it's so powerful. Another thing you could do is, for example, if in starting soon you don't want any of your sounds to play, you could click that and simply delete it if you wish to. It's completely up to you how you wish to use the template, but hopefully it gives you a really good kickstart to using OBS in a really organized way. Now you should have a pretty good starting setup, a good understanding of how to best approach OBS with the right organization, and you're ready to go live. Now from here, you might decide to further customize your stream using filters, plugins, or custom browser docs, so stay tuned for more videos. Let's go!